Welcome to Phantom Tales, where chilling stories come to life. If you enjoy tonight's tale, please like and subscribe. It really helps. Let me know where you're listening from, and get ready for a night of suspense and mystery. Let's begin. It started on an ordinary evening, the kind where you scroll mindlessly through Instagram, double-tapping photos of sunsets and pets. I was relaxing after a long day, trying to unwind when I noticed the notification. @Shadow Watcher followed you. The username was strange, but not unusual enough to raise any alarm. I clicked on the profile out of curiosity. It was nearly empty. No bio, no profile picture, just a single post of a black screen. The caption read, "Watching." I laughed nervously, brushing it off as one of those weird accounts that pop up occasionally. Maybe a bot, I thought. Still, I didn't follow back. The next day, I noticed that Shadow Watcher had liked a few of my older posts, ones from years ago. That was when the unease started to creep in. Who scrolls that far back unless they're deliberately snooping? I decided to block the account. It was probably just someone messing around. But the moment I hit block, a direct message popped up. "Why did you block me?" The message froze me in place. How could they send me a DM after I had already blocked them? I reopened their profile to double-check, but the account was gone. I shrugged it off, thinking it was some glitch, and carried on with my evening. But as the hours passed, a nagging feeling grew in my gut, like something wasn't quite right. That night, as I lay in bed scrolling aimlessly, a new notification appeared. "E-Watcher in. The shadows followed you." The profile picture was blank, and the bio read, "You can't get rid of me." My heart sank. It was clearly the same person, but this time there were 3 posts. The first was the same black screen I'd seen before. The second was an image of a dark, empty street at night. But it was the third photo that made my stomach turn. It was a picture of my apartment building. The caption read, "See you soon." I immediately reported the account and blocked it again, my hands trembling. I checked the locks on my doors and windows before crawling into bed, trying to convince myself it was just an elaborate prank. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The next few days passed uneventfully, though I found myself jumping at shadows and checking my phone constantly. I told myself it was over, that whoever it was had gotten bored and moved on. Then, one night, I received a video in my DMs from a newly created account. @Eyes Everywhere. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The video was only a few seconds long, but it showed a close-up of my front door. It was unmistakable. The chipped paint, the worn welcome mat. Someone had filmed it from the hallway outside my apartment. I felt sick. My hands shook as I called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. I didn't have a name, an address, just a string of creepy usernames and deleted profiles. They promised to send someone to patrol the area, but their reassurances felt hollow. I stayed awake that night, every creak and groan of the building making my heart race. But nothing happened. No footsteps in the hall. No knocks at the door. When morning came, I tried to convince myself that I was safe, that whoever it was had moved on. But then I opened Instagram. A new post from @Eyes Everywhere appeared on my feed. It was a photo of me, taken through my window. I was sitting on the couch, staring at my phone. The caption read, "You look better when you're scared." I deleted my Instagram account that day, thinking it would solve the problem. But the messages didn't stop. They started coming through text messages, emails, even handwritten notes slipped under my door. The notes were the worst. The handwriting was erratic, the kind you'd expect from someone unstable. They said things like, "Why don't you want to talk to me? I'm always watching. You can't hide from me." One day, I came home to find a note taped to my door. It read, "I was inside your apartment today." That was when I decided to leave. I packed what I could and moved to a different city, staying with a friend while I searched for a new place. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my family. For a while, things were quiet. No strange messages, no creepy accounts. I started to feel like I could breathe again. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was from a brand new Instagram account. At "The Watcher Returns, followed you." I didn't click on the profile. I didn't need to. The message that came through moments later said everything I needed to know. You can run, but you can't hide. And that's when I realized the truth. Whoever they weren't just online. They were everywhere. I don't check my notifications anymore. I don't want to know what they'll say. But every time I hear a knock at the door, I wonder if they've finally decided to come inside. It was supposed to be a fun night. Just 4 friends chasing a thrill. St. Mercy's Hospital had been abandoned for decades. A massive, crumbling structure on the outskirts of the city. Everyone in town knew the stories about it. Whispers of strange experiments, patients who were never discharged, and shadowy figures seen in the windows long after the hospital had shut down. For years, the building had been sealed off, its gates chained and its windows boarded up. But that didn't stop the rumors, or the dares. And tonight, it was our turn to see what was inside. There was me, Olivia, the cautious one, Ryan, the self-proclaimed leader, Natalie, who was always up for an adventure, and David, the skeptic who only came along to prove how fake the stories were. We arrived just after midnight. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the decaying hospital. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and rot. The chain on the gate was already cut, swinging slightly in the wind. "Convenient," David muttered, shining his flashlight on the path ahead. Ryan grinned, clearly unfazed. "Looks like someone else wanted a look. Guess we're not the only ones curious." The front doors were slightly ajar, the wood splintered and warped. As we stepped inside, the air grew colder, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the empty halls. "Creepy," Natalie whispered, her voice bouncing off the walls. We stuck together as we moved deeper into the hospital. The ground was littered with broken glass and debris, and graffiti covered the walls. Crude drawings and words like "Get out" and "They see you." David rolled his eyes at one particularly ominous scrawl. Classic. People always love to make these places seem scarier than they are. But as we walked, it became clear that St. Mercy's didn't need any help being terrifying. The further we went, the more it felt like the hospital itself was alive. The air grew heavier, and every sound seemed amplified. The creak of floorboards, the rustle of papers in the wind, the faint hum of something electric? It's just your imagination, I told myself, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. We eventually found ourselves in what looked like the main ward. Rows of rusted bed frames lined the walls, their mattresses long gone. A thick layer of dust covered everything, but the room felt wrong. "All right, let's split up," Ryan said, his voice way too cheerful for the situation. "What?" I snapped. "Are you serious?" "It's a hospital, Liv. We'll cover more ground this way. Meet back here in 20 minutes. Natalie hesitated, but nodded, while David gave me a smug look. "Don't tell me you're scared already." "I'm not scared," I lied, my stomach twisting into knots. We paired off, Ryan with Natalie and David with me, and headed in opposite directions. David and I explored the east wing, which had once been the surgical department. The hallways were narrow, and the peeling paint gave the walls a ghostly appearance. I tried to focus on the flashlight beam in front of me, but it didn't stop the feeling that we were being watched. "So, what's the big deal with this place?" David asked as we passed a rusted gurney. "It's just an old building. People make up stories to scare themselves." Before I could respond, a loud clang echoed from somewhere ahead of us. "What was that?" I whispered. David smirked. "Probably just the wind. Or rats. Relax." But the sound came again. Closer this time. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like metal being dragged across the floor. "Rats don't make that noise," I said, my voice trembling. David didn't reply. For the first time all night, he looked nervous. We rounded a corner and found ourselves in a room that had once been an operating theater. The large overhead light hung crookedly, swaying slightly as if moved by an unseen force. The floor was sticky in places and the air smelled faintly of something metallic. "Okay, this is officially creepy," David admitted. We heard a faint whisper then, so soft it was almost inaudible. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" The whisper came again, louder this time. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it was calling my name. "Olivia." I froze, my blood turning to ice. "Who's there?" David shouted, spinning around with the flashlight. The beam caught something, a shadow, darting out of sight. "Did you see that?" I hissed. "Yeah," he said, his bravado completely gone. "We need to get out of here." We ran back toward the main ward, the whispers growing louder with every step. When we finally reached the meeting point, Ryan and Natalie were already there, both pale and wide-eyed. "Where were you guys?" Natalie demanded. "We've been hearing things. Footsteps. Voices. Something's not right." "We saw something," I said. "A shadow, or—" Before I could finish, a loud bang came from behind us. The doors to the ward slammed shut, and the temperature dropped sharply. "Okay, we're leaving. Now," Ryan said, trying to sound calm, but failing. We headed for the exit, but the hospital seemed to shift around us. Hallways that should have led to the front doors now ended in dead ends. The graffiti on the walls looked different. Words like "Stay Forever" and "No Escape" appeared where there had been nothing before. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" Ryan shouted, pounding on a locked door. The whispers turned into laughter, low and guttural, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Run!" Natalie screamed. We sprinted down the hall, blindly searching for a way out. Doors slammed shut behind us, and the walls seemed to close in. The laughter grew louder, almost deafening, and I could feel something chasing us. Something I didn't dare look back to see. Finally, we burst through a side door and into the cold night air. We didn't stop running until we were far from the hospital, our lungs burning and our hearts racing. When we reached the safety of Ryan's car, we turned to look back. The hospital loomed in the distance, dark and silent, as if nothing had happened. But as we drove away, I glanced at my phone. There was a new notification on the screen. "St. Mercy's Hospital tagged you in a photo." My hands shook as I opened it. The photo was of the four of us standing in the main ward. But there was someone else in the picture, a tall, shadowy figure standing just behind us, smiling. We haven't talked about that night since, but sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear the laughter. It all began with a post I stumbled across late one night while doom-scrolling on Reddit. I joined a new subreddit called r/unexplained mysteries because I loved creepy stories, even if most of them were fake. The post was simple but eerie. Help. My roommate is acting strange, and I don't think they're human anymore. It was posted by a user with the handle u/lostinroom7. The title alone was intriguing, so I clicked immediately. The post read, "For the past few nights I've been hearing strange noises coming from my roommate's room. At first, I thought it was just sleepwalking or some weird late-night habits, but now I'm not so sure. I've caught glimpses of them through the door, and it's like they're not them anymore. Their skin looks wrong, almost too tight, and their eyes don't reflect light like they used to. It's like something else is wearing their face. I think I'm being watched constantly. Should I confront them? What should I do?" The responses were the usual mix of jokes, skepticism, and well-meaning advice. Comments ranged from, "It's just sleep paralysis, dude," to, "Move out now. That's not your roommate anymore." But something about the post felt off. I checked u/lostinroom7's profile. They had no other posts or comments, just this one, like they'd created the account specifically to share this story. I bookmarked the thread and went to bed, thinking nothing more of it. The next day, curiosity got the better of me, and I checked the post again. It had blown up overnight with hundreds of comments, but the original poster hadn't responded to any of them. That's when I noticed an edit at the bottom. Edit 1. Thank you for your advice. Things have gotten worse. They're not pretending to be human anymore. They're standing outside my door, just staring. The subreddit exploded with theories. Some thought it was a creative writing exercise. Others suggested it was a mental health crisis. A few were convinced it was real. Later that night, the post was updated again. Edit 2. I locked myself in my bathroom. I can hear them scratching at the door. I don't know how much longer I can stay in here. Please, someone help me. My heart raced as I read it. This couldn't be real, could it? I refreshed the page repeatedly, waiting for another update. Around 2 a.m., a final edit appeared. Edit 3. They're in. It's too late. If you find this post, stay away from room 7, and then the post was deleted. The thread was archived by the time I checked it the next morning. The mods claimed they couldn't verify the authenticity of the post and had removed it to prevent misinformation. But the comments were still there, filled with people speculating, joking, and panicking. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who was this person? Where were they? What did they mean by stay away from room 7? I decided to investigate further. I Googled room 7 strange events and found nothing. No news articles, no Reddit discussions, no follow-ups from you/Lost in Room 7. It was like the post had vanished into thin air. For a while, I convinced myself it was just an elaborate hoax. But then, a few nights later, something weird happened. I was lying in bed, scrolling Reddit as usual, when I received a direct message. The sender's username was U-Room 7 is real. The message read, "Why didn't you listen?" Chills ran down my spine. I clicked on their profile, but it was empty. No posts, no comments, just the account creation date. That very night. I ignored it, telling myself it was some troll who'd seen my comments on the original thread. But over the next few days, the messages kept coming. You've been warned. It's watching you now. Room 7 is closer than you think. I blocked the account, but the messages didn't stop. New accounts popped up every time I blocked one, all with variations of the same username. Room 7 knows, beware room 7, 7 is waiting. Then, things got worse. One night, as I was shutting my laptop, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow moved across the window, but when I looked, nothing was there. I told myself it was just my imagination and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of scratching. It was faint, coming from somewhere inside the room. I held my breath, straining to hear. The sound stopped, replaced by a low whisper. "Why didn't you stay away?" I jumped out of bed, turned on every light, and searched the apartment. There was no one there. The next morning, I noticed something odd. My laptop, which I'd left closed on my desk, was open. A new tab was open in my browser, displaying a blank Reddit post draft. The title field had been filled in with 4 words. Room 7 is here. I deleted the draft and shut the laptop again, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. That night, I slept with the lights on, but it didn't help. I woke up to find my bedroom door ajar, even though I'd locked it. On the floor was a piece of paper I didn't recognize. Written in shaky handwriting were the words, "You brought it with you." I don't know what's happening. I've stopped using Reddit, but the warnings haven't stopped. The scratching, the whispers, the shadows. They're getting worse. Last night I found a new note on my desk. It wasn't handwritten this time. It was typed, like it had been printed on my own computer. It said, "You can't escape room 7. It's not a place. It's an idea. And now it's part of you." I don't know what to do. I don't know if anyone will believe me. But if you're reading this, please, stay away from room 7. And whatever you do, don't let it find you. It started like any other shift. Delivering pizzas wasn't exactly my dream job, but it paid the bills, and the late-night hours meant good tips from drunk partygoers. Most nights were uneventful, just me, my beat-up car, and the occasional sketchy neighborhood. But that night was different. It was nearing midnight when the order came in. The address wasn't one I recognized, which was rare. I'd been delivering pizzas in this town for years and knew almost every street. The location was marked on the outskirts, past the industrial area, where the streetlights were few and far between. "Looks like you've got a weird one," my manager Greg said as he handed me the receipt. "Great," I muttered, glancing at the details. The address was 147 Blackwell Road. I couldn't even picture where that was, but the GPS had it marked, so I figured it couldn't be too hard to find. Greg smirked. "You want me to call it back and make sure it's not some prank?" "Nah, I got it. If they're messing with us, they're still paying for the pizza." With the box in hand, I headed to my car, the scent of melted cheese and pepperoni wafting up from the seat beside me. The night was unusually quiet, the streets nearly deserted as I drove past the familiar neighborhoods and into the industrial zone. The further I went, the less familiar everything became. The GPS guided me down narrow, crumbling roads lined with abandoned warehouses and overgrown lots. Eventually, I reached Blackwell Road, or what was left of it. It wasn't a proper street, more like a gravel path cutting through a patch of dense, overgrown forest. I hesitated. The road was dark, the trees towering overhead like looming shadows. My gut told me to turn around, but I thought of the $25 tip the customer had promised in the delivery notes. "Money's money," I muttered, gripping the steering wheel and driving forward. The gravel crunched under my tires as I navigated the winding path. The GPS said I was getting close, but there were no houses, no streetlights, nothing to suggest anyone lived out here. I was starting to think I'd been pranked when I spotted it, a single, dim light glowing in the distance. As I got closer, I saw the source of the light. It was a house, if you could call it that, an old, decrepit structure that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The wood was warped and rotting, the windows were boarded up, and the porch sagged under the weight of neglect. Yet there was a faint glow coming from inside, like someone was home. I parked the car and stared at the house for a moment. This can't be right, I thought. But the number 147 was nailed crookedly to the front door. Grabbing the pizza box, I stepped out of the car. The air was colder than it should have been, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of my footsteps on the gravel. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. "Hello," I called out. "Pizza delivery." The door creaked open slightly, just enough for me to see into the dark interior. A faint, musty smell wafted out, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Your pizza's here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was no response, but the door creaked open a little more, as if inviting me inside. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I needed proof of delivery if I wanted to get paid. Hesitantly, I stepped onto the porch. "Look, if this is a prank, it's not funny," I said, pushing the door open wider. Inside, the house was pitch black except for a dim light coming from a room at the end of the hallway. The air was thick and heavy, and the floorboards groaned under my weight. "Hello," I called out again, my voice echoing down the hall. I took a few steps inside, clutching the pizza box like it was some kind of shield. As I walked, I noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols and writing in a language I didn't recognize, carved deep into the wood. The light at the end of the hallway flickered, and I could hear a faint sound coming from the room. It was rhythmic, like a whispering chant, but I couldn't make out the words. "Here's your pizza," I said, my voice trembling. "I'll just leave it here and go." But as I turned to set the box down, the door behind me slammed shut, plunging the hallway into darkness. "Okay, this isn't funny," I shouted, fumbling for my phone to use the flashlight. The chanting grew louder, more insistent, as if it were coming from the walls themselves. The symbols seemed to shimmer in the light of my phone, like they were alive. I backed away, my heart pounding, and bumped into something. Or someone. Spinning around, I shone the flashlight into the face of a man. At least, I think it was a man. His skin was pale and stretched too tightly over his bones, and his eyes were hollow, empty pits. "You shouldn't have come here," he rasped, his voice like dead leaves scraping against pavement. I dropped the pizza and bolted for the door, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Behind me, the chanting grew louder, the voices overlapping and echoing in a maddening cacophony. "Let me out!" I screamed, pounding on the door. The air grew colder, and I felt something brush against my back, a hand, impossibly cold and claw-like. I turned around, but there was no one there. Then I saw them. Shadows moved in the darkness, figures that were too tall, too thin, with limbs that bent at impossible angles. They were coming closer, their hollow eyes fixed on me. I don't remember much after that. Somehow, I managed to kick the door open and sprint to my car. I didn't look back as I sped down the gravel road, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel steady. When I got back to the pizzeria, Greg was waiting for me. "What the hell happened to you?" he asked, staring at my pale face and trembling hands. "I'm done," I said, tossing the delivery bag onto the counter. I quit that night. The next day, I checked the receipt for the order. The number listed was disconnected, and when I tried to pull up the address on the GPS, it was gone. Blackwell Road didn't exist. To this day, I don't know what I walked into that night, but sometimes, late at night, I hear that whispering chant in the back of my mind, and I know one thing for sure. I'll never deliver to a place I don't recognize again. I had always struggled with insomnia. Some nights were manageable. I'd scroll endlessly on my phone or read until my eyes burned. But on nights like this one, the restlessness was unbearable. It felt like my body was vibrating, my thoughts racing too fast to catch. No amount of deep breathing or white noise could lull me to sleep. By 2 a.m., I gave up entirely. Lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, was pointless. My small apartment felt suffocating, the air stale despite the open windows. I needed to get out, even just for a short walk. The idea of going outside so late should have unnerved me, but it didn't. The quiet streets and the cool night air sounded more inviting than the restless stillness of my bed. I grabbed a hoodie, slipped on my sneakers, and headed out. The park was only a few blocks away. By day, it was a bustling place where families picnicked, joggers circled the paths, and kids played on the swings. By night, it was deserted, calm, serene. I figured a lap around the park might tire me out enough to finally get some sleep. As I stepped onto the main path, the chill in the air was sharper than I'd expected. The moon hung low, its silver light casting long shadows through the trees. The lamps along the pathway were spaced too far apart, leaving stretches of darkness between pools of faint yellow light. For a while, it was nice. The crisp air, the crunch of gravel under my feet, the absence of car horns or distant chatter, it felt peaceful. But as I walked further into the park, the peacefulness started to feel strange. It wasn't just quiet, it was silent. Too silent. No rustling leaves, no chirping crickets, not even the hum of distant traffic. Just the sound of my own footsteps. I stopped walking, suddenly aware of how alone I was. The park had always felt safe during the day, but now it felt massive, empty, like the trees were pressing in on me. "It's just your imagination," I muttered, trying to shake the creeping unease. I turned a corner and saw the playground up ahead. The sight of the swings and slides was oddly comforting, a familiar landmark. I figured I'd sit on one of the benches for a bit before heading home. As I got closer, though, I noticed something strange. One of the swings was moving, not just swaying slightly in the breeze. It was swinging, as if someone had just pushed it. I stopped in my tracks, staring at it. There was no wind, no one else around. Probably just my tired brain messing with me, I told myself, though my heart was beginning to race. I walked up to the swing, trying to convince myself that there was a logical explanation. As I reached out to stop it, a voice spoke behind me. "Couldn't sleep either." I jumped, spinning around. A man stood a few feet away, smiling faintly. He was tall, thin, and dressed in dark clothes that made him blend into the shadows. "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you," he said, raising his hand slightly like he was trying to show he wasn't a threat. "No, it's fine," I said, though my voice came out shaky. "I just wasn't expecting anyone else to be here." "Yeah, I come here a lot at night," he said, stepping closer. "Something about the quiet, you know?" I nodded, but something about him felt off. His smile was too wide, his eyes unblinking. "What about you?" he asked. "What brings you out here so late?" "Couldn't sleep," I said, taking a small step back. "Insomnia's the worst," he said, tilting his head slightly. "Sometimes. I think it's better out here. Less lonely than staring at the ceiling, don't you think?" I didn't answer, my eyes flicking to the path behind him. "Are you alone?" he asked, his voice suddenly quieter. The question sent a chill down my spine. I forced a laugh, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, but I was just about to head back. Getting late." He took another step closer, his smile fading. "You should stay. It's safer here." "Safer?" I echoed, my pulse pounding in my ears. Before he could answer, something moved in the shadows behind him. It was subtle, just a flicker of motion, but enough to make him turn his head. His expression changed instantly, the friendly facade dropping. "I have to go," he muttered, backing away from me. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't follow me," he said sharply before turning and disappearing into the darkness. I stood frozen, staring after him. Then I heard it, a low sound, almost like breathing, coming from the playground. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the shadows. At first, I saw nothing, but then, beneath the slide, I saw them. Two pale eyes, reflecting the dim light like an animal's. They blinked. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted down the path, my footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I was out of the park and back on the familiar streets near my apartment. Even then, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see those pale eyes following me. When I finally made it home, I locked every door and window, my chest heaving. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I don't know what I saw in the park, and I don't think I want to know. I haven't been back since. These days, when insomnia strikes, I stay in my apartment, because whatever's out there in the park, it's still waiting. Moving into a new house should have been exciting, a fresh start. But this house didn't feel like a fresh start. It felt wrong. From the moment I stepped inside, something about it unsettled me. It was hard to explain. The air felt heavier, the silence thicker. But I told myself it was just nerves. Moving to a new town, living alone for the first time, it was a lot to adjust to. The house itself was old but charming in its way. It had creaky wooden floors, high ceilings, and tall windows that let in just enough light to make the shadows seem alive. It had been vacant for years before I rented it, and despite the property manager's assurances that it was perfect for someone like me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't entirely welcome. The first night passed without incident. I spent most of it unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and trying to make the place feel like mine. But even as I worked, I couldn't help but notice the little things. The faint smell of something damp, the way the air seemed colder in certain rooms, the faint hum that I couldn't quite locate. By the time I went to bed, I was exhausted. The master bedroom was sparsely furnished, just a bed and a nightstand, but it was enough. I climbed under the blankets and closed my eyes, hoping for a good night's sleep. I didn't get one. I woke up sometime after midnight, my heart pounding for no reason. The room was silent, the kind of silence that felt unnatural. I turned on the bedside lamp and looked around. Everything was as I'd left it. Nothing out of place, no sign of anything unusual. But I felt it. That feeling you get when you're being watched. It was so strong, I couldn't ignore it. My eyes darted to the window, the corners of the room, even under the bed. Nothing. But the feeling didn't go away. I eventually convinced myself I was being paranoid and went back to bed, though it took hours to fall asleep again. The next day, I tried to brush it off. Moving stress, I told myself. Everyone gets a little jumpy when they're in a new place, but the feeling didn't go away. Every night it was the same. I'd lie in bed, trying to sleep, and wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, convinced I wasn't alone. On the fourth night, things got worse. It was late, probably close to 3 a.m., when I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. I froze, holding my breath, straining to listen. The house was old. It made noises, creaks, groans. But this wasn't that. This was distinct, the sound of someone walking. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The screen lit up, casting a faint glow around the room. I opened the flashlight app and shined it toward the bedroom door. It was closed, just as I'd left it. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. I froze, every muscle in my body locked in place. The door creaked open an inch, just enough for me to see into the dark hallway. There was nothing there. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at that open door, too afraid to move. Eventually, I got up the courage to check the hallway. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a lamp, and stepped outside. The hallway was empty, just a long stretch of dark wood and faded wallpaper. But the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. I checked every room, every closet, every corner. There was no one there. But when I went back to my bedroom, the lamp on my nightstand was turned upside down. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called the property manager. I tried to sound calm, but my voice shook as I told her what had happened. "You're sure you were alone?" she asked, her tone skeptical. "Of course I'm sure," I snapped. "There's something wrong with this house." She hesitated. "You know, the last tenant said something similar. That's why they left. But we've never had any incidents." "Incidents?" I repeated, my stomach twisting. "What kind of incidents?" She didn't answer, just muttered something about sending someone to check the locks and hung up. That night I decided I wasn't going to stay in the bedroom. I set up a makeshift bed in the living room, surrounded by as much light as I could manage. It didn't help. Around midnight, the lights began to flicker. First the lamp by the couch, then the overhead light, until the entire room was plunged into darkness. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it toward the hallway. The door to the basement, the one I'd made a point to never open, was ajar. Something moved behind it. It was just a shadow, quick and subtle, but enough to make my blood run cold. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice breaking. The door creaked open wider, revealing the dark staircase leading down. The air that wafted up was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of rot. I didn't wait to see more. I grabbed my car keys and bolted out of the house, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. I spent the night in my car, parked down the street, watching the house from a distance. Nothing happened. No lights, no movement, no sign of anything unusual. The next morning, I called a moving company and told them to get my stuff. I didn't care about the lease, didn't care about the money. I just wanted out. I never went back to that house. I don't know what was in there, and I don't want to know. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the basement door, about the shadow I saw behind it, and I wonder if whatever was in that house is still waiting for someone to come back. There's something about the forest at night that changes it completely. By day, it feels alive, peaceful even, with sunlight streaming through the canopy and birds chirping in the distance. But at night, it becomes something else. Something darker. I'd always loved camping. The idea of disconnecting from the noise of the city, breathing fresh air and sleeping under the stars was irresistible. So, when my friends canceled last minute on our weekend camping trip, I decided to go alone. I knew the risks. Camping alone wasn't exactly safe, but I'd been to this particular spot a dozen times before and knew it like the back of my hand. It was a small clearing deep in the woods, far from the main trails but close enough to a stream that I never had to worry about water. When I arrived that Friday afternoon, everything seemed normal. The air was crisp, the sun warm on my face. I set up my tent, gathered firewood, and even managed to catch a few fish in the stream for dinner. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt completely at peace. That feeling didn't last. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The forest is never truly quiet. Not during the day, and certainly not at night. There's always some noise, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the chirping of crickets. But as I sat by the fire, the usual nighttime symphony seemed muted. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was overthinking it. But as the hours passed and the fire burned lower, the unease grew. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night. I doused the fire, zipped myself into my sleeping bag, and closed my eyes. The forest was so still I could hear my own breathing, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. That's when I heard it. A faint sound, almost like whispering, coming from the trees. I froze, straining to listen. It was too soft to make out any words, but it was unmistakably human. Or at least, it sounded human. "Hello?" I called out, my voice breaking the silence like a crack of thunder. The whispers stopped. I sat there for a long moment, my heart pounding. Maybe it was just the wind, I told myself, or an animal. I was in the middle of the woods after all, but deep down, I knew it wasn't the wind. I lay back down, telling myself there was no reason to panic. But the moment I closed my eyes, I heard it again. This time, it was louder, closer. "Who's there?" I shouted, sitting up and grabbing the flashlight from beside my sleeping bag. I shined it toward the trees, the beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing. The forest was empty, the shadows still, but the feeling of being watched was so strong it made my skin crawl. I sat there, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline, until the whispers stopped. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I fell into a restless sleep. I woke up to the sound of footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, circling the tent. My eyes flew open, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The footsteps were just outside, the sound of boots crunching on dry leaves. I grabbed the flashlight again, my hands shaking as I unzipped the tent just enough to peek outside. There was no one there. The clearing was empty, bathed in the pale light of the moon. But the footsteps continued, moving closer. "Who's there?" I shouted, stepping out of the tent. My voice echoed through the silent forest. The footsteps stopped. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, from somewhere deep in the woods, I heard it. A low, guttural sound, like a growl. I backed toward the tent, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The growl grew louder, closer, until it seemed to echo from all around me. That's when I saw it. A shadow, tall and thin, standing at the edge of the clearing. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I could feel its eyes on me. I froze, unable to look away. The shadow seemed to grow, stretching upward until it towered over the trees. And then it spoke. Its voice was deep, almost a rumble, and the words were incomprehensible, like a language I'd never heard before. But the intent was clear. It didn't want me here. I turned and ran, abandoning my tent, my gear, everything. I sprinted through the forest, the branches clawing at my skin, the shadows closing in around me. I didn't stop until I reached my car, panting and shaking as I fumbled with the keys. I didn't look back, didn't dare glance at the trees as I sped down the dirt road, the tires kicking up dust in my frantic escape. I didn't sleep that night. or the next. When I finally returned to the campsite with a few friends to collect my gear, everything was gone. The tent, the sleeping bag, even the fire pit. It was like I'd never been there. The forest was silent as we searched, the air heavy with something unspoken. My friends tried to laugh it off, saying I must have gotten lost or mistaken the location. But I know what I saw, and I'll never go back to that forest again. It started with a simple dare. My friends and I were bored, as we often were on Friday nights in our small, uneventful town. Someone suggested exploring the old warehouse on the outskirts of town, a decrepit building rumored to be haunted. It was the kind of place kids dared each other to visit, but no one actually did. The warehouse had been abandoned for decades, its original purpose long forgotten. Its windows were shattered, its walls covered in graffiti, and the roof sagged ominously. But despite its sorry state, there was something about it that drew us in, like it was waiting for us. Armed with flashlights and a crowbar, just in case, we made our way inside. The air was thick with dust, the faint smell of mildew clinging to everything. Our footsteps echoed unnaturally in the cavernous space. It didn't take long to realize the place was bigger than we'd thought. Hallways branched off in every direction, leading to darkened rooms filled with forgotten machinery and piles of debris. Most of it was junk, but then we found the tapes. They were in a small, windowless room at the back of the warehouse. Stacks upon stacks of VHS tapes, piled haphazardly on metal shelves and spilling onto the floor. Some were in plain black cases, others labeled with dates and cryptic descriptions like Session 12 or Test 4A. "What do you think these are?" Sarah asked, picking one up and turning it over in her hands. "Probably old security footage," Mike said. "Or maybe training videos for the workers. Nothing exciting." But something about the tapes felt off. The labels were handwritten, the ink faded and smudged. Some of the cases were sticky, like they'd been handled with unwashed hands. And the dates, they went back decades, but none of them matched up. "Let's take a few," I suggested, my curiosity getting the better of me. "We can watch them at my place." We each grabbed a handful and made our way out of the warehouse, none of us speaking as we walked back to the car. The tapes felt heavier than they should have, like they were weighted down with more than just plastic and magnetic film. Back at my house, we set up in the living room. I still had an old VHS player in the attic, relic of a bygone era, and after some fumbling with the cables, we got it working. The first tape we tried didn't have a label, just a blank white sticker on the spine. I slid it into the player, and the screen flickered to life with static. At first, there was nothing but a black screen. Then, slowly, an image appeared. A room, dimly lit with a single chair in the center. The camera was stationary, fixed on the chair, and there was no sound. "Is this some kind of art project?" Mike asked, leaning forward. But before anyone could answer, a figure entered the frame. It was a man, tall and thin, wearing a suit that looked decades out of fashion. His face was obscured by shadow, but he moved with purpose, dragging something behind him. A body. Sarah gasped, and I felt my stomach churn as we watched the man hoist the limp figure onto the chair and tie them down with rope. "Turn it off," she said, her voice trembling. But I couldn't. I was frozen, transfixed by the screen as the man stepped back, tilting his head as if admiring his handiwork. The tape cut to static, then resumed. The chair was empty now, but the walls were smeared with something dark. "Okay, that's enough," Mike said, reaching for the remote. I stopped him. "Wait. Look." The camera had panned to a corner of the room, where something was scrawled on the wall in shaky handwriting. "Help me." The tape ended abruptly, leaving us sitting in silence, the only sound the hum of the VHS player. We should have stopped there. We should have burned the tapes and never spoken of them again. But we didn't. The second tape was labeled Test 4A. This one started with a close-up of someone's face. A woman, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth moving soundlessly. The camera pulled back to reveal she was strapped to a metal table, her wrists and ankles bound. The screen flickered, and suddenly the room was filled with shadows. Not people, not animals, just shapes, moving unnaturally like they didn't belong in this world. The woman thrashed against her restraints, her silent screams growing more frantic as the shadows closed in. The tape ended with a high-pitched screech that made all of us jump. "Where did these come from?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The warehouse," Mike said. "You saw it. Just an old building full of junk." "This isn't junk," I said. "This is—" I didn't know how to finish the sentence. The third tape was worse. It started with static, the screen flickering so violently I thought the VHS player might break. Then, suddenly, we were looking at what seemed to be a field at night. The camera was shaky, the person holding it breathing heavily. They were running. The camera jolted wildly as they stumbled, their breaths turning into gasps. In the distance, something moved. A shape, tall and angular, its limbs too long, its movements jerky. The person holding the camera screamed, the sound distorted and echoing, and the screen went black. For a moment, we thought it was over. Then, faintly, a voice came through the speakers, low and distorted. "You shouldn't have watched." By the time we finished the last tape, it was nearly dawn. None of us had spoken for hours. "What do we do with them?" Sarah finally asked, her voice hollow. "We put them back," Mike said firmly. "We put them back where we found them, and we forget this ever happened." But when we returned to the warehouse, the tapes were gone. The shelves were empty, the floor swept clean. It was as if they'd never been there. To this day, I don't know who made those tapes, or why. But sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers coming from the attic, and I wonder if the tapes found their way back to me. I had always been a fan of a YouTuber known for exploring the unknown. His videos ranged from urban exploration in abandoned buildings to deep dives into unsolved mysteries, always with a touch of suspense that kept you on edge. His personality was what really set him apart, calm and charismatic, yet thrilling when it came to his explorations. His channel had gained quite a following, and he had become known for his raw editing style and captivating storytelling. But there was something different about him. He didn't just make videos. He took you on an adventure into the kind of places most people were too afraid to go. Then, one night, everything changed. It started like any other video, a late-night exploration of an old mansion outside a small town. He had teased the video earlier, hinting at some mysterious history behind the mansion, and his followers were eagerly awaiting the release. When he finally uploaded the video later that evening, I didn't think it would be the last one he would ever post. The video was titled "The Last Haunt." From the moment I pressed play, I noticed something was off. The usual intro was missing, replaced by a shaky camera, almost as if he had started recording in a rush. He didn't greet his audience as he usually did, and there was no upbeat tone. The editing was raw, unfiltered, and it didn't feel like the polished content I had come to expect. The scene opened with him walking through the front door of the mansion. The wood creaked beneath his feet, and the place looked even more decayed than in the teaser, with broken windows and dust covering every surface. But his voice, usually so calm, was quieter this time, almost like a whisper. "I found something," he said, tension creeping into his voice. "Something I can't explain, but I need to show you." At first, I thought it was just for dramatic effect, building the suspense. But as the video progressed, the atmosphere grew more unsettling. He wandered through the dark hallways, shining his flashlight into the corners, revealing old paintings with eerie, hollow eyes and forgotten furniture that seemed as though it had been abandoned for years. Then he found it. In one of the rooms, a large wooden door was partially open, revealing a narrow stairwell leading down into what looked like a basement. He hesitated for a moment, then pulled a flashlight from his bag and started descending the stairs. The camera followed, but the light from his flashlight barely illuminated the dark path ahead. As he ventured further into the basement, The camera shook slightly, and the strange noises of the house became more noticeable. But there was something else, too. A faint whispering. It was hard to tell at first, but as the camera zoomed in on his face, you could see his expression change. He heard it too. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, as though they were coming from the shadows. Mark's breathing grew quicker, his hand trembling slightly as he raised the camera. And then, there it was, a figure in the darkness, just out of the flashlight's reach. For a brief moment, the camera caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows, but before Mark could react, the video cut to black. That was the last anyone ever heard from him. His channel went silent for days, then weeks. His social media accounts were updated sporadically at first, odd, cryptic posts and comments from fans asking if he was okay, but there was no reply. The only thing left was that eerie video. The more I watched it, the more I realized there were details I had missed. Small, unsettling things that seemed to hint at something darker. Some viewers began speculating that the mansion was cursed or that he had encountered something he wasn't meant to. Others claimed the whispers were a sign of something paranormal, something that followed him back. But no one really knew what happened to him. Months later, rumors began to spread. Some said the video had been faked, that it was all part of an elaborate hoax. Others insisted that he had stumbled upon something far worse than he'd ever imagined, and that the mansion had claimed him. But the truth, no one ever really knew. To this day, his channel remains up, but there are no new videos. It's as if he vanished into thin air. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if that whispering from the basement was a warning that I and everyone else who watched missed. Perhaps it's not the mystery of what happened to him that's the most unsettling, but the fact that his last video still haunts me. Every time I watch it, I hear the whispers again, a little louder, a little clearer, and I'm afraid that one day I'll hear them calling my name. It started as just another episode of a late-night TV show, a program dedicated to exploring abandoned places and documenting paranormal phenomena. Into the Unknown was what it was called. The host, an experienced investigator named Leo Harris, and his team were known for their chilling encounters with ghosts, spirits, and unexplained occurrences. They had traveled all over the country, visiting some of the most notorious haunted locations, but none of them had ever felt quite like the story Leo shared during one of the episodes. He had just returned from an abandoned school in a small town, one that was not too far from where I lived. The school, an old Victorian building with crumbling walls and shattered windows, had been abandoned for over 30 years. But the stories that surrounded it were far darker. Some claimed that it was cursed, others said that strange things happened to anyone who dared to enter. In the episode, Leo was sitting in the studio recounting his experience in the school. His usual calm demeanor was shaken, and his words were tinged with unease. "We thought we were ready for anything," Leo said, his voice low, "but nothing could prepare us for what we found inside that school. There was an old classroom, far back in the building, and when we walked in, we felt it immediately. The temperature dropped, like stepping into a freezer. But that wasn't the worst part." He paused, and for a moment I thought the camera had cut out, but then he continued. "I saw a shadow. No, not a shadow, a figure. It was a child, standing by the window, staring out. But the thing is, the figure never moved, and when we tried to approach it, it vanished right before our eyes, and as we left, we heard a sound, a child's laughter echoing down the hall, but there was no one there. I sat there, frozen in my seat, a chill running down my spine. The more Leo spoke, the more his fear was evident, and I realized he wasn't the type to get rattled easily. He had been in some of the most haunted places on Earth, but this school had shaken him. And then he said it. "The scariest part? That school. It's in a town near me, near here." The camera zoomed in slightly, and Leo looked directly at the audience. "If you live near a place called Westbrook, stay away from that school. Don't go there. Trust me." My heart skipped a beat. Westbrook wasn't far from where I lived, just a 30-minute drive. I'd heard rumors about the school, of course, but I never paid much attention to them. Until now. I don't know what possessed me that night, but I couldn't stop thinking about the school. Leo's words kept replaying in my mind, and I found myself staring at the screen, unable to look away. There was something about the way he spoke, something in his voice, that made me want to know more, even though I knew I probably shouldn't. The next day, I called a few of my friends. "I think we should go check out the school," I said. They didn't hesitate. They were just as curious as I was, maybe even more so. We made plans, and that weekend, we drove out to Westbrook. It was an overcast day, and the sky looked like it might rain. The school stood at the edge of the town just as Leo had described it. An old, decaying building with broken windows and a tall, iron fence surrounding the property. The moment we pulled up, we all felt it. A strange, oppressive heaviness in the air, like something was watching us. "I don't know about this," Emily, one of my friends, said, her voice shaky. "This place gives me the creeps." "We've come this far," I said, trying to sound confident. "We'll be fine." We climbed over the fence and made our way to the front door, which was hanging off its hinges. Inside, the building was even more unsettling than I had imagined. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled stale, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. But what was most disturbing was the silence, an eerie, all-encompassing silence. As we walked through the halls, we came across old classrooms, broken desks, and torn books scattered on the floor. But there was something else. A feeling, like we weren't alone. I could feel eyes on me, even though no one was around. We made our way to the back of the school, just as Leo had described. It was colder here, much colder than it had been outside. There was a room tucked away behind a crumbling wall. It felt as though the air itself was thick with something unspoken. "Let's check in here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We stepped inside, and the temperature dropped instantly. My breath came out in visible puffs. The room was empty save for a few old chairs and a chalkboard, long since forgotten. But then, as we ventured further, something caught my eye, a shadow near the window. I froze. It was fleeting, like a person darting out of sight, but it was enough to make my heart race. "There," I whispered, pointing. We all looked in the direction I had seen the shadow, but there was nothing there, just an empty room. My mind raced. Could it have been the wind? Or was it something else? Suddenly, we heard it. A faint sound, like a soft giggle. It was coming from somewhere down the hall. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "It's nothing," I said, though my own words felt hollow. We decided to leave the room, but as we turned to head back down the hall, the air grew even colder. And that's when we saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the corridor. It was a child, wearing old-fashioned clothes, staring at us with an expression I can't describe. It wasn't moving, but its presence was suffocating. We didn't wait to see if it was real. We bolted for the exit, hearts pounding, and didn't stop running until we were safely in the car. We didn't speak much on the drive home. What could we say? We had all seen it, and we all knew what we had experienced wasn't normal. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Even now, as I sit here writing this, I wonder if that figure is still in the school. Perhaps it's waiting for someone else to find it, just as we did. Maybe some places are meant to stay forgotten. Maybe some things are better left unexplored. But one thing is certain, I'll never go back to that school. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. I hope you found some peace and comfort in the story. Before you drift off into sleep, I'd love to know what time it is where you are and which country you're watching from. Feel free to share in the comments. And, of course, don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales. Until next time, rest easy and sweet dreams.